Hello everyone, this is Bill Griffin. Welcome to Different Take Podcast. Please subscribe, like, share, comment if you like the content on this channel. New episodes Tuesdays and Thursdays. Really appreciate watching. Politicians often say climate change poses an existential threat. But many times they don't define, you rarely hear them define exactly what that means. A threat to all mankind on Earth, the Earth, both. But I wonder if many of them actually believe what they're saying. This is Amy Klobuchar recently talking about the hurricane that hit Florida in 2022.
We just did something about climate change for the first time in decades. That's why we've got to win this as that hurricane bears down on Florida. We got to win in the midterms. We understand that.
So if you elect Democrats, there will be less hurricanes. Really? That really makes that much difference. A lot of Democrats in the media call people that question the costs to combat climate change. If you question that, you're called a climate change denier or climate denier. When you talk like that, it raises a red flag. Do you really believe that climate change is such a threat as you claim that it is? Such an imminent threat. Because existential threat means imminent. But I'm sure there are true believers. The way to combat climate change, to really get to the heart of the matter, is control population. Reduce population on Earth, reduce reduce emissions, reduce the use of fossil fuels because there's less people to use them. And that is not often talked about, but there is a book written by Paul Ehrlich. Paul Ehrlich is a professor at Stanford University. Book that he wrote, I think it was 1968. It was common in high schools and colleges. This is the cover: Population Control, a Race to Oblivion, the Population Bomb. Right, you are reading these words. 4 people have died from starvation, most of them children. So, his theories on how to deal with population control was to have less children. How you do that? Well, you put sterilants into water. At least he floated that idea. Put temporary sterilants in public water so that you cause men to become impotent and can't procreate. There is a number of other things that he advocated for. Incentives, disincentives for having children, not assisting countries that were struggling with feeding their population. In other words, let them die to save the earth. Things like that. True believer. But many people are not true believers. So I'm going to play 3 clips from a gentleman that discusses the hysteria and that there's no cost too great. He discusses this with Peter Robinson on Uncommon Knowledge. This was an interview that was done recently in summer of 2022. He is the author of a book called False Alarm: How Climate Change Panic Costs Us Trillions, Hurts the Poor, and Fails to Fix the Planet. His name is Bjorn Lomborg. This is the first clip.
Matters and how you then tackle this. Remember, it turns out to be fairly easy to tackle more heat. We know how to do that. It's air conditioning. If you look at the US, despite the fact that temperatures have risen over the last century, heat deaths have dropped dramatically in the US. They used to be huge. They're fairly minor now in the US because we have air conditioning. It's very simple to do. You can do that. You just need to go indoors or go to the mall that's air conditioned in those 1 or 2 or 3 days when this is, the heat really peaks. On the other hand, cold deaths is much harder to deal with because that requires you to have heating on for the whole winter time. That's often costly and something that pensioners and poor people can't really afford. And one of the things that have happened because we have made climate policies is that energy has become more expensive. And that means that people can't afford to keep their homes as well heated. So what's actually happened in the US, and probably also many other places, but we don't have as good data, is that heat deaths have gone down despite global warming, but cold deaths keep going up. Probably partly because we can't afford our energy anymore.
So you hear this hysteria, in my opinion, about rising heat. Keeps getting hotter and hotter every year. That's the claim, the media, academics, politicians. And this what this gentleman's saying is, well, if that's true, then the worst thing you would do is to clamp down on U.S. energy production, which the Biden administration has done, along with all Democrats are in lockstep on this. Cut down our energy production. We have to lead the way in the world. When what this gentleman's saying is that's the worst thing you can do, because that if what you're saying is true, then that means you need to produce as much energy as possible because people can't afford energy to heat their homes and they're going to die. So they talk about catastrophe, but they don't really explain what the catastrophe is. And what this gentleman is saying is the catastrophe could very well be you have no concern about the cost, and the cost add up in people's lives. And that's not necessary. If you're a true believer, you believe in less population. I don't think this Professor Mann or Joe Biden believe that. And I don't think many politicians believe that. This is about control. They don't really care that much. They claim to care, but it's hard to believe, because what you have is you have no consideration for the cost. So you have no consideration for the welfare of the people that live on this earth right now. And you're predicting what exactly? That's the issue with a lot of people that propose a reduction of energy production, oil and natural gas, because they claim that's the issue, but those are presumably finite resources. So you're a climate denier if you question that the world's going to end in 10 years, as this gentleman says. Or the way to ending, to be more specific. He's not going to say the world ends because he'll come off a lot more kookier than he sounds already. So no cost is too great, including people that die from cold. So reduce energy production so that people will die from the cold instead of the heat. Doesn't make a lot of sense to me. If you're a true believer, you wouldn't care how high the price of gas is. The threat is imminent. We have to do whatever we can. It doesn't matter what your standard of living will be. It doesn't matter about your ability to feed yourself and jobs and the economy and that sort of thing. $25 a gallon for regular instead of $4. I mean, it's horrible right now, but if you really are a true believer, you'd want a 25. That's not what Joe Biden wants. Joe Biden wants lower. He wants more. The Saudis to pump more oil. That indicates to me that he's not a true believer. And many politicians aren't. They prefer keeping their power than this threat of climate change, which is imminent, according to them. Nuclear power is off the table. You do not hear the folks that advocate for, say, the Green New Deal and the Inflation Reduction Act and that sort of thing. They don't advocate for nuclear power. It's a non-starter. But the deaths from nuclear power, if you talk about the human cost, are far lower than what have been incurred through the many, and the damage to the environment, the many oil spills, for example, and deaths from explosions and things of that nature. Energy production has to be all wind and all solar. Wind or solar, that's it. Bjorn Lomborg, later in the interview, he makes the point, Lomborg makes the point that the government, instead of throwing a lot of money at subsidizing companies to produce energy, that it would make more sense to throw money at people who research innovations. Then the companies pick up those innovations. For example, There's researchers that find, say for example, a cure to cancer, and they take that research and they turn it over to Pfizer, which produces the medicines that people want and need. So that could be done with energy innovations. You may recall 2009, 2011, Democrats controlled both houses and the presidency. So if you're true believers, you pass laws that would really throw the U.S. economy in complete turmoil, but they chose not to do that. So they're telling you that climate change is an existential threat, but their actions don't back up their words. One of the great developments in producing energy in the United States is the development of fracking. But environmentalists don't like fracking at all. Now, politicians, I think they're just appeasing their left wing that are all in on green and are true believers. Another thing that I think you will find will happen with this Inflation Reduction Act that just passed this year, there will be some sort of scandal involving corruption, such as you saw back in the early Obama years with a company called Solyndra. I think you'll see that. There will be some sort of company that ripped off the taxpayer to the tune of millions upon millions of dollars, and I won't be surprised to hear that. There's also this idea that you have to ban red meat, that you have to ban plastic straws without any consideration to, the straws that you would produce that would replace the plastic straws may not be an improvement, but it sounds good. It's a reaction that has nothing to do from the politician. It's a political reaction that has nothing to do whether or not it's a good idea or not, and it actually would work. Why wouldn't you ban private jets? If you're a true believer, what's the point of private jets? You could reduce many private jet travels, but the elites they're not going to be crazy about having to go into an airport. Nancy Pelosi's of the world don't really believe this stuff. She likes her private jet. Federal flood assistance that doesn't make a lot of sense. Why would you subsidize the rebuilding with taxpayer money, subsidize the rebuilding of homes that you say that land is not, the seas levels are rising, the water levels are rising. Why would you subsidize the rebuilding over and over again of these homes and businesses and so forth when there's no future? They're just going to get blown away again. Well, actually, in those situations of hurricanes, you elect Democrats, there won't be hurricanes, so there won't be problem insuring property. That's the folly of the way these politicians talk about this. You can't control other countries, what they do. This is a global thing. Climate change is global. You can't control these other countries unless you go to war. Go to war to bend them to your will, maybe reduce the population, which will help. That's what a true believer would really, the actions that they would take. But these people are not true believers. It's about control. It's all about control. This is Pete Buttigieg, 2019, in a Democrat primary presidential. He's a presidential candidate in 2019, backed out real early. Pete Buttigieg tried to explain sacrifice was necessary because the climate crisis is on par with winning World War II, perhaps even more challenging than that. Does he really mean that? 70 to 80 million people, maybe percentages, 3 to 3.7%. Look this up. Those are sort of the ranges of how many people died in World War II. Is he talking about human cost? Is that what he's talking about? That the world's population will be reduced by 3 to 3.7%. How? How will this happen? You think he knows? I don't think he knows what he's talking about. I don't think he believes what he's saying. Or is he talking about the sacrifices the average day American had to deal with during World War II? their standard of living was rationing, sons, daughters, brothers, going off, never seeing them again. The casualties that come back, I don't think he believes what he's talking about. One example that you see on the local level where local politicians and also the federal government, they subsidize this sort of thing, is public transportation. So you have buses going all over the place that are empty. So if you're a true believer, you wouldn't have empty buses going all over the place that are empty. They use the word climate denier when a lot of people are simply questioning the cost. What are the costs? And this gentleman, Bjorn Lomborg, questions the cost, and he does it in a very, very thorough way and tries to think about all the costs, and particularly the human cost. So I'm wary. I know there are true believers, but I'm wary of Democrat politicians that push these sorts of things because it's for control. It's for control. I will solve your problems. Listen to the first clip, Amy Klobuchar. I will stop the hurricanes along with my Democrat colleagues. If you vote for Republicans, you won't stop the hurricanes. But I will. It's ludicrous. And it's targeted toward voters young people that over the years this has been ingrained in their thinking that climate change must be stopped at all costs. And that's very not logical. Really not logical, I should say. So thank you for watching. I really appreciate it. I'd like to know what you think about this topic or any other. And new episodes Tuesdays and Thursdays. Please subscribe, like, share, comment. Thank you.